Oh, this is a really important question, and it actually is an issue that we've put together a 6-step plan for Michigan. We've seen other states take action, and unfortunately, in our state, our governor has shown no interest in really solving the opioid problem that we have. Ironically, the states that are doing the best job when it comes to combating opioid abuse and addiction are Mike Pence's Indiana and Chris Christie's New Jersey. So I'm not being partisan when I say there are some really basic things that we could do as a state that would combat opioid access on the front end before addiction sets in. 2.5 people die every single day from opioid addiction and abuse in Michigan right now. More people die of opioids than die in car accidents in a year here, or die of gunshots in Michigan. It's ravaging families and communities, and it's not a moral failing like so many people are trying to make it and divide us and keep us from solving the problem. It's addiction. It's a disease. So I think that the first thing that I would do as governor is declare a state of emergency and harness the resources necessary to give communities the anti-overdose drugs so they have it handy, to create a system where we've got more drug courts, to create the database, statewide database, so that doctors are checking every time they write a prescription, which they do in other states, but they're not doing right now in Michigan. It required that pharmacists have to check in on that database too. And we've got to give people mental health services in Michigan. We have a lot more on my webpage with regard to the 6 steps that are part of my plan to fight opioid crisis here in Michigan. If you want to check it out and give me some feedback, I encourage you to do that.
Our next question, there are quite a few retirees in the audience tonight. And as a state employee retiree, one of our audience members asks, I'm concerned about my pension being taxed. What's your position on this?
I fought the pension tax. I tried to beat Rick Snyder on the pension tax. I led the fight, and I will sign the bill when it comes to my desk. We will get rid of the pension tax. That's my commitment. And here's how I know we will get rid of it. I'm not quick to make promises I can't unilaterally deliver on. I will tell you about my commitment. I will tell you about my plan and my vision and my strategy. But on this one, I can tell you it's going to happen because Republicans don't like it and Democrats fought against it the whole time that it was being debated and passed. So no matter the makeup of the next legislature, I'm quite confident it's coming to my desk and I will sign that thing.
An audience member says, in an era unlike any other in which political outsiders hold office, often to disastrous effect, how will you inspire confidence as a political insider in Michigan voters?
Okay, great question. I think after 12 months of Donald Trump and 7 years of Rick Snyder, isn't it about time we hire someone who knows what the heck they're doing? That's really when I should drop the mic and walk out.
Now, the first one is a question. It says, who will make a good lieutenant governor? The second one is not a question, it's sort of a statement. It says gerrymandering. Help us, please.
All right, amen. So I'm going to take the second one first because that's the much easier question. Gerrymandering. First of all, I know that there are people from Voters Not Politicians in the room, so let's give them a hand. have so many of the problems that we have in the state of Michigan right now. When I went into my last term in the Senate, I took my oath of office as the Senate Democratic leader, just coming off of an election where we got almost 50% of the total votes cast were for Democratic candidates on the ballot. So it really should have been a 19-19 tie. I should have been the co-leader of the Michigan Senate. But instead, I was the leader of 12 out of 38. Because of gerrymandering, 26 of those 38 Senate seats were decided in a Republican primary. When Republican primary voters are setting the agenda for us all, we're talking about the slimmest group of people with the most extreme views, setting the agenda that we all have to live by. Gerrymandering is undemocratic, and that's why I'm so glad to see Voters Not Politicians catch on. I'm so amazed to see the volunteer and the organization. Like, it was a phenomenal thing, and that's the kind of energy that I'm talking about when I say I'm getting around the state. People are on fire, they are engaged. So we've got to pass Voters Not Politicians. We absolutely have to make sure that we've got fair line drawing after the next census in 2020. I'm going to dovetail for a second into the experience question. Because I served with 3 different governors during my time in the legislature. And I'll tell you that there was one who was a lot better able at getting an agenda accomplished than the other 2. And I'm talking about John Engler. And I'm not praising him, let's be very clear. Hear me correctly. But he knew how to work that legislature. He knew how to set a budget. He knew how shrewd appointments made a long-term difference for his party. And he built a Republican Party and a bench. That's what we need to do in this election. Because we're going to win this race. And I'm still going to, all right, let's clap. But we're going to win this race. And even when Voters Not Politicians passes, we don't get another shot at fixing the state Senate and voting by real, fair districts until after 4 years. And that's why having a governor who knows what she's doing makes a huge difference to the agenda that we all care about. Now, running mate. I don't know who the running mate's going to be yet. You got suggestions? You know, I take very seriously the thought of what a ticket looks like so that we win. That's the goal. We got to win. And I want a teammate who sees the world the same way, who's going to fight like heck every single day to win this election, and then who's going to be great at governance in case I leave the state for a day or 2. And so that requires a real vetting process. I got to tell you, as a candidate for statewide, for a governor's race, probably one of the most premier races in the country. The whole world's going to be watching to see what happens in Michigan in this governor's race. I know that the first person I researched was me, because I want to know what lines of attack they're bringing. And guess what? The good news is, even after seeing it, I'm still here. So there's not too much to be worried about. But the point is, I'm making a joke. I hope I didn't make you all nervous. But I need to, we will have a process for determining a running mate, and there are a number of people that have reached out and shown some interest in being considered. And the good news is that there are a lot of fantastic Democrats across our state who are ready to sacrifice privacy, put the work in, and win this election, and I'm excited about that.
Next, we have a couple questions about campaign financing. What's your position on campaign financing? And another question asks, who is your single largest campaign contributor?
My single largest campaign contributor is Emily's List at this point in time. And with regard to campaign finance, we've got to have reform in Michigan. The rules are so perverted in this state You know, when I was in the Senate, my Republican counterpart and I were on a panel, and we were talking about campaign finance, and they had just doubled the limits so that they went from, you know, $3,400 to $6,800 for a PAC. It's went from $34,000 to $68,000. They doubled everything, and they did it because their donors can afford to give them a lot more money. Let's just be honest. But we were sitting and talking about campaign finance, and I talked about every campaign I've ever run has been locally driven, small dollar funding, and it's hard work. It's not easy to compete with these guys who have 1 or 2 donors who can write enormous checks. I said, you know, after a quarter, we had, you know, a few thousand donors, and they had given, you know, $30 a piece, or whatever the numbers were. And I had looked at his campaign finance statement. For the whole quarter, he funded his whole quarter, which he raised twice as much as I did, my caucus and I. He made 1 phone call to 1 family on the west side of the state and got 9 big checks. We have 1 family setting the agenda. So we need real campaign finance reform. I will tell you that in this race, I am really proud that we raised $3 million last year. No one's ever done that before. But the thing I'm most proud of, and no other candidate can say this, 86% of those dollars came from inside Michigan. And 83% were $100 or less. So that's a much more grassroots campaign than anyone else is running, and I think that shows strength, that shows energy. And I'll tell you that the most fond contribution that I've received, and that sounds like a weird thing to say, but it came with a note from a woman right after the presidential election. And it was a check written to Whitmer for governor. I hadn't even formed a campaign committee yet, so I had to return it. Otherwise, it would have been unethical. But it was written for $20.18 in hopes I run in 2018. So.
Next audience member said, "Love all your ideas so far!" Exclamation mark. But how will we pay for them? And then another part of the question is, what are the specific proposals you have to raise revenue for the state budget?
So see, Democrats are responsible. We want to know how we're going to pay for it, and I think that that's an extremely important question. And I'm never going to throw a proposal on the table that I can't pay for, that I don't have a plan to make a reality. I'm not one of those people that is just going to say whatever I think it is that someone wants to hear. I want to know that I'm going to be able to deliver. I believe in reasonable expectations and over-delivering as opposed to the other way around. So when I was in the Senate, I authored the Michigan 2020 plan, and that was a 4-year college plan modeled after the Kalamazoo Promise. I paid for it by closing corporate tax loopholes. Well, the state, we need to do that. The state budget at the time was about $40 billion, $42 billion, all right? The amount of money that we don't collect in taxes, which is spending. If a tax is due but you choose not to collect it, that's spending. Dwarfs how much money we do spend on our state budget. So the amount of money we give away to corporations while you all are paying your taxes dwarfs the government that we are able to fund. If we found 10% savings, if we found 5% savings, we could pay for every Michigander who wants to go to a 4-year degree to get one. That's why I paid for it. So when I talk about how we get more money into education, I am going to close off all the raids on the school aid fund that have occurred under this governor. Our infrastructure package is gonna be coming out it's gonna be coming out soon. I hate to put a date on it because things get edited and pushed back, but it's gonna be coming out soon, and it is gonna be a jobs and infrastructure package, and I think it's gonna knock your socks off when you see what it is we're gonna do, how many people we're gonna put to work, and how we pay for it. But rest assured that as these planks come out, there will be a funding source attached to every single one of them that is legitimate and that is doable and that I am gonna go to the mat to make a reality.
Our next question is, what is your stance on medical marijuana?
I only pause because I'm trying to figure out how long of an answer to give. So, I'm gonna be a yes vote. And, or medical marijuana? Oh. Well, is it recreational? Okay. All right, well, I'll answer both just in case anyone's curious. So, back in 2008, when medical marijuana was on the ballot, I co-chaired the stem cell campaign. I've introduced for years legislation to try to permit stem cell research in Michigan. We were one of only 5 states that criminalized the most cutting edge research and hope for cures. And I kept trying to introduce legislation to fix that. And we couldn't do it, so we went around the legislature and went to the ballot. It was the same year as medical marijuana. I supported both. And I supported it long before we knew whether or not it was going to be socially acceptable. But because everything that I had been through with my mom and her brain cancer, I was absolutely convinced anything we can do to relieve pain or give someone a better quality of life in their sickest days is something we should be doing. Same with stem cell research, which is why I became such a passionate advocate and we got it passed. And that's why I embraced both of those. Now, here we are at a point in time where states are legalizing the recreational use of marijuana. And Jeff Sessions, who knows what's going to happen out of Washington, D.C. It's still a Schedule I drug, and it's a very nervous place to be for a lot of people who are in even the medical marijuana industry. But states that are moving forward have find that their voters overwhelmingly pass it, and I think that's what's going to happen in Michigan. If it gets on the ballot, I believe it is going to pass. And so my lens is always, how do we make it work for Michigan? These other states have had some real problems, just on the front end of not thinking through what other laws do they need placed in the books to make sure that it doesn't get into the hands of children or people that are under 21. Your brain is still wiring, and where marijuana use has some devastating effects. We can learn from those states, but I think it is time that it's going to be on the ballot and it's going to pass, and I'm going to vote for it. And then that helps that other question about how we're going to pay for everything.
Our next question is about right to work. What kind of plan do you have to repeal right to work?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for whomever wrote it for phrasing it that way, because you're obviously someone who understands what it's going to take to get rid of right to work. So when we had the right to work, I hate even using their language. When we passed their corporate servitude bill, you know, it's signed into law, it's on the books. It is going to take a legislature to send it to my desk in order to repeal right to work. Now, there are a lot of things. A governor who knows how to use a budget, who knows how to make appointments, who knows how to have vendors who are contracting with the state. There are a lot of policy that a governor can make a reality without going the traditional route of the legislature. But if we're going to repeal right to work, we've got to end gerrymandering and take back the legislature. That's what I've heard people say on day one, I'm going to repeal right to work, and I can't say that to you because I know that that's not how it works, and I can't deliver on that promise. But I am absolutely committed to protecting collective bargaining in Michigan. I always have been, and I work with